go. Wait, did it start?
Yeah.
Okay. So our book was House on Mango Street. This book was written by Sandra Cisneros in 1984, and the gist of the book was it was a life of Esperanza, which was a Mexican American, and she moved from apartment to a house, and it was about her life in Chicago from a 12-year-old growing up, and it discusses her neighbors, pictures, the places where she lived, and with those she befriends and lives near, and then also talks about her stories of her being sexually assaulted, hitting puberty, her first crush, and how she leaves Mango Street.
hmm Okay, so I can start by answering question one.
Okay.
So question one is, what was the purpose of the book? And I basically said the House on Mango Street is a wonderful story that was written by Sandra Cisneros, and it depicts a young girl named Esperanza who moves to Chicago when she's 12, like you just said. And she faces many difficult challenges like puberty, sexual assault, and the death of her family members. And through these tragic experiences, she grows into a young lady. And it's basically a story of coming to age. And the author chooses a very vulnerable time of life. You know, even I know it's not a story that's about like a boy or something, but it's a vulnerable time in girl and boys growing up. Um, so it's easily relatable to a lot of the audience that is targeted, like that middle school age. Um, and it's just like Esperanza learning where how everything changes and trying to adapt and grow from what happens to her. And that's why that's what makes the story so relatable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with you. For what I wrote down for my purpose, it's kind of like just a little like statement, and I said, "You always belong, even if you don't feel like you do." And I just feel like this, especially because at times in the book, she, it was just like she was like different from everybody else at times. I remember like at first she was kind of shy and not really comfortable when they first moved and everything. And so I just feel like as an outside, like being an outside perspective of the book, at times in life, sometimes we feel like we don't belong, even though when you really look at it, we do. Like God puts us in that position, puts us where He wants us in life.
hmm Yeah. So question number two says, if this book was intended to teach the reader something, did it succeed? And I basically put for that one like what you kind of just said for the
Mhm.
purpose. I said it was intended to teach the reader that no matter how out of place you may feel, that you will always belong. Um, just because she does learn how to fit in. She doesn't obviously she doesn't fit in ways that other people do. Just because like she is a different ethnicity and there's like you can fit in, but like there's always going to be that feeling that you don't fit in. So she makes her way of herself to fit in, and she has friends that she grows with to help her feel that way. And I think even towards the end of the book, you can still tell that she's still developing, trying to figure out where she belongs, but she's becoming more confident in that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I feel like it definitely teaches on that with like kind of like just being able to be yourself, but allow yourself to fit in with other groups, but you're still unique in that way. Like she definitely like eventually fit in with her groups and found her friends and everything, but she didn't allow like people to change who she was throughout the book. She still like expressed herself and was able to adapt like that. And it just shows us in life like not to it's like not to fall under the peer pressure in a way, like just allow your character who you are to be expressive in every area that you're at.
Yeah, I agree. Um, question number three says, was there a specific passage that left a good or bad impression, and share that passage and its effects. So I chose a sentence on page 109. It says, I like to tell stories. I'm going to tell you a story about a girl who didn't want to belong. And I think that's important because like she didn't like being defined. Like her friend said something a few chapters before that about like her address and that being her house, and she's like, no, that's not my house. And her friend tries to convince her like, yes, even though you don't like it and you don't want that to be what people think about you, is like that old red like rundown house.
Mhm.
But just it kind of just gives a reader like the sense that like your past doesn't define your future.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of what she is understanding there at the end. She's like telling her story of not wanting to belong. Like she had all these challenges, but it almost seems like she wasn't working with the things that were working for her, like she never looked towards the positive until somebody brought it up to her. It was always like the negative, and I think she was just worried about not fitting in.
Mhm.
And until it was brought to her attention, she didn't really realize all the good things she had ahead of her.
Yeah, for me, I didn't write down the exact page number, but I want to say it was more towards like the first like few chapters of the book. But it was out of the window her whole life, the way so many women sit their sadness on an elbow. I wonder if she made the best what she got, or was she sorry because she couldn't be all the things she wanted to be. And I looked at this because I know it was talking about like the specific person she was talking about was like a woman who was married, like one of her friends or at the time, who ended up marrying at a young age to a guy that ended up being like a really toxic relationship, and she couldn't like leave the house and everything and stuff. And it's just like it just made me ponder like how sometimes we allow others to like hold us down like a ball in a chain, and not allow yourself to like especially like in a relationship, like just stuck out to me because sometimes in relationships some people are a ball in a chain, whether it's just a friendship or an actual like spouse, and then others allow them to like be their own person and still have like a life outside of it. And so like especially the part that said she couldn't be all the things she wanted to be, like I don't know, that kind of like hurts me because especially as a teacher standpoint, like we want to see everyone be successful in life, and we want them to
Mhm.
get up to the dreams and goals and to hopefully conquer and accomplish everything that they set their mind to. So it's like sad to think like how some people um uh may choose like, yes, this is what I want, and in this case like a marriage, but then even though it's something she wanted, it ended up being something that completely turned sour and was exact opposite of what she thought it would be. So
Mhm.
I don't know, that just stuck out to me a lot.
Yeah, and that you mentioned like the our point as like a teacher. I kind of was thinking about it and how like she just like since she's living in an area that is an area of poverty,
Hmm.
um they weren't given those like the resources to understand and like to be educated
Hmm.
about like basically just growing up and like all I don't know if I don't really remember the book talking about like her parents.
Hmm.
She kind of just talked about her and like her siblings and other people, and I also think like the characters were like in and out of the book on purpose. Because at first it kind of confused me, like, oh well, this person's there and now they're gone, and like it happened a lot through the book. But then I was just realizing like she's been moving around all her life, and she's 12. She's never had like a concrete support system really. And that's hard, and to like actually get a good education when you're constantly moving is even harder, because how do you gain trust from people when you're only with them for so long?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so question number 4 says, did the author cover both sides of the topic fairly and thoroughly, or did the book appear to be biased? Um, I think it did focus a lot on um like the negatives and like what can happen and what does happen to young people who grow up in poverty, and like even like it talks about Esperanza's difficult challenges, you know, like sexual assault and like
Mm-hmm.
death in her family and stuff like that. Those definitely are unfortunate things.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think that it does a good job of balancing them because it has a hopeful twist to it, you know,
Mhm.
like although you started out at a really low point, you can still like get far in life basically.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with it. I wrote down that I feel like the author definitely covered both sides pretty well because she's a Hispanic author herself, and she gives a great example of life in a Mexican American Latino environment in big city of Chicago, and she just paints the picture really well, especially like because like what you said, how you can start low in life, but as long as you look towards the good and everything, you can always get yourself out of it and finish at the higher end of the spectrum. But you know, I definitely feel like she definitely did show both sides of it pretty well.
Yeah. So, question 5 says, after reading the book, has your interest been piqued about the subject matter? If so, would you consider reading more on the topic in the future? Um, I definitely think it was interesting. And even like our other books that we read, I think it would be interesting to keep reading and learning about these different cultures, because I feel like I'm not as educated as I should be. Um, but I think this book is a really good example for like teaching in school, you know, like middle school age kids. But I was kind of doing some research and I saw that the book has actually been banned in a lot of schools because of like the domestic violence and the sexual assault that it talks about, which is a little sad to me just because like I mean, yeah, it's a hard topic to talk about with, you know, like middle school kids, but I mean, they have to learn about that stuff so they know, you know, they can't just be sheltered from it. Um, and some of them might even find that the story relates to them and they might feel comfort in reading a story like that. And it might make them want to seek help to get out of a bad situation that they're in.
Yeah, no, everything you touched on, I completely agree with. Like, I actually didn't do the research. I didn't know that it was banned. My dad, who's a high school English teacher, I don't know if he uses this in his classroom or not, but he actually suggested it to us at the beginning of the semester to read it. And so, like completely what touching on what you said with how it is sad that it's banned. I completely agree. Like I get like sometimes we want to shelter our students, but it's like it's honestly I kind of look at it like this class like at first like I completely felt uncomfortable at times talking about race, but it's like you have to get out of that comfort shell in order to learn and grow about other cultures, and just this book in general I liked it a lot just because it allowed me to view a different culture that I haven't really touched on. And just in a teacher aspect, like they especially in this class we talk about how we want to get to know our students and get to know their backgrounds and get to know the school's culture and everything just by doing that like in American to Me and everything, and just everything we're going over, how that will help us become better teachers and better individuals. And I feel like especially with like a book like this, it could definitely help. And like you said, it could I for sure guarantee there would be at least one student in every class that could relate to this subject matter. And I just find it kind of strange though how like they would ban it because of those specific topics. Because I know like growing up, I remember reading books with classes that have touched on stuff like that. Even like that might be more vulgar and sexual and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So like it's kind of weird how like generations are changing in a way. I don't like I agree with it, but sometimes I don't, especially with like this subject matter, which is like learning about a different culture because it didn't really like dive that deep into those topics. So it was just like talking about her life and like it happened. It wasn't like the whole book in a sense or like about a whole chapter. So like
Yeah.
I definitely feel like it still would be a great book to choose to use as an example to just go over a different culture to grow your students' mind and help them think differently.
Mhm.
But so this was our book talk on House on Mango Street by I just forgot her name. Sandra Cisneros in 1984.